Broadcasting from the 72nd floor of First Canadian Place in the heart of Toronto's financial district, this is #Finance, the podcast that profiles innovative entrepreneurs and thought leaders operating in the public markets. Presented to you by the CSE, the Exchange for Entrepreneurs.
Welcome to another edition of #Finance. I'm your host, Barrington Miller, and this is a special edition because not only do I have the beloved and well-respected Alan Brochstein from 420 Investor and New Cannabis Ventures, but we are doing this on Skype via the 72nd floor of First Canadian Place in downtown Toronto. Alan, where in the world are you?
I'm in the warm Houston, Texas.
It's cold here. We got snow a couple days ago, and it's really, really annoying, and I'm a little jealous.
I'll see you in June. That's all I have to say. But it's great to see you in Chicago recently. It wasn't too cold there, and I'm sorry we didn't get a chance to chat then as much as we will today, but this is exciting.
But the basis of Chicago led to today, for those listeners and viewers, Alan and I have basically been playing tag since January when we hooked up in Miami.
Yep.
So that was good. Really, really good conference. And Alan is a very well-respected voice for the cannabis industry and some would say a market guru of sorts.
You said beloved earlier. I'm going to take that one back. I don't know if I'm beloved, but hopefully respected and more of a pioneer, I would say.
You are a pioneer and a trailblazer, and people still go to you and your subscription services when they want to know what's going on. So let's talk about what's going on.
Sure.
We're in Toronto, and let's talk about some Toronto things. The first one being Drake.
Yep.
Drake has recently announced his partnership with Canopy, and I believe he is taking, with his new company, he's going to be 60% owner, and Canopy will be 40%. Now, the reason I wanted to bring this up and talk about it a little is Health Canada has some strict guidelines regarding cannabis promotion. Very, very strict. Now, Drake, being the megastar that he is the owner of the company.
Yep.
So this is sort of blurred lines, because if he does talk about it, if he does do whatever he wants, as he can as the owner, majority shareholder of his company, what would you do if you were Health Canada? Should he be allowed to do it? Can he do it?
That's the problem with Canada. Why are we even talking about this? There's so many problems, and we're talking about should Drake be able to do this or not, and they're not paying him to do it, so it's kind of interesting. And I think the bigger issue, Barrington, is they were stuck with this Bedrocan factory, and I think that's what they're using here, if I'm not mistaken, in Scarborough. And so it's nice to see there's such a deep story here. Number one, Bruce Linton's gone, and one of his legacies was the deals that he put together with Seth Rogen and Snoop Dogg and Martha Stewart. And so now it is kind of interesting to see the new Canopy, or let's call it Constellation, kind of reinforcing that concept. And it's really tough. The competition in Canada is so intense, and we're not talking about between Aurora and Canopy and Vireo. We're talking about with the black market, and so I kind of like this concept. I don't know if it works that great. We'll see. I haven't really seen data out of Houseplant, I think it's called, the Seth Rogen LP. But, I think that Canopy Growth, in their empire building efforts, they ended up with a lot of assets that they need to repurpose. And I think that's what's going on with this asset, actually, for the Drake company, more growth.
What I really like seeing is, as you've been a pioneer, we've, as the Canadian Securities Exchange, have been involved in the industry since day one. You don't know which way this river's going to bend and flow. And when this announcement came out, it's like, oh, right, of course, he can do this, or he should be allowed to do this, or this is great. We didn't sort of see this coming, but it's a natural evolution for this. And you
I
mentioned,
think people should copy it, Barrington, instead of, if anybody's going to complain to Health Canada, just go do their own deal like this.
absolutely.
That's kind of my attitude on it. But, we'll see. Canopy Growth, and by the way, I meant to disclose they are client of New Cannabis Ventures, and I'll try to mention that any other time, but we have a disclaimer that mentions all the clients. But Canopy Growth has been pushing the envelope for a long time and figuring things out ahead of others, and it's brilliant in their defense. I don't know if this one works or not. We'll see. But once again, they're the trailblazers, not me.
Yeah, no, I remember a few years ago when MedMen started advertising on satellite radio, and what are the rules for that? It's space. So getting back to Bruce Linton, he's been now named the executive chairman at Vireo, another CSE listed company.
Client of ours, by the way.
What does this mean for him? It seems that because again he's basically a rock star in the industry. Wherever he goes, people will go, people will follow. By him choosing Vireo or Vireo choosing him, what sign does this put for the industry, put for Vireo? Just what are your comments?
Yeah, so Bruce is a good friend of mine, and I will say what I want to say. He respects that. He doesn't. If I say something incorrect, he's going to give me a hard time. But I will say that I was not pleased with some of his choices, and I let him know. I won't go into detail, but you got to know Bruce. It just killed him, not so much to have to leave Canopy, but to not have something to do. And I think he kind of rushed into his other things. Maybe I think he had 3 announcements, and I'm going to say one of them for sure I was really curious about. We discussed that, so I'm not. I just want to be real clear. I'm not just talking about Bruce behind his back. But I like this one, and as I said, Vireo is a client of New Cannabis Ventures, and I've known Kyle Kingsley for several years now, and they're not super capital markets savvy, and I think Bruce brings that to them. And if you think about the matches, if you were to go through all the places, the publicly traded companies, let's say, where Bruce could have ended up, I really think this is one of the very best fits for him. Bruce, for a long time, has been elaborating on his views that it's really medical or pharmaceutical that's the biggest opportunity. I know he talks about the drinks and all that other stuff, but he's really talked about the pharmaceutical. And this goes back to a different life of mine, but Vireo has licensed some technology from Ligand Pharmaceutical, big NASDAQ-traded biotech, has a technology called Captisol. And so they're very scientific, and they've done other things with nicotine harm reduction, and we also know that Bruce likes him. So I think there's a really good fit, like strategically, fundamentally. And then the Vireo stock is really cheap. I think, I don't like to tout clients like that, so I'm not saying to buy it. And I have no position in model portfolio or anything, just to be real clear. I don't have any personal positions, but so I'm not trying to tell anybody to buy it. I'm just saying as an analyst, if you look at it, it's cheap, and probably cheap for a reason. It hasn't gotten liquidity yet. And I think, that's the trade-off that they did. And if you look at the compensation that Bruce got, if I understood it in full, it's all warrant driven.
Yes.
So there's a great alignment there. So I have to say,
I think there's 3 tranches of the.
And they are all above, at or above the market. I think it was. I like it. I will say that, and I think Bruce would be well served to focus himself a little bit instead of spreading himself out all over the place. That would be my personal advice to him if he asked me.
Well, when the company came in, I remember speaking with Kyle and just some of the vision that he was talking about, and what really, really captivated me and got my ears perked was the Puerto Rico play. That was, I think that's interesting. It's very, very much tied into the U.S., so it falls under the federal, but it's not. And so I'm just curious, as being a spectator, as to where that shapes up. Now, also in recent news, there was an analyst out of New York who said recently, we are at the bottom.
Mm-hmm.
This has been a 2-year descent, and now this is the bottom, and 2020 is basically going to go right up. What are your yeah, I mean, nothing goes straight up, but I don't disagree, and I think that some of the crazy valuations that we saw earlier on, I didn't look at the market as bottoming out. I just looked at it as coming in line, being more realistic. But how do you feel about that call?
So first and foremost, let me say I hope he's right. That's for sure.
Yeah.
It's not a call that I'm necessarily going to make right this second, but I conceptually I agree with it. And I think if we step back, there's been so much excitement and disappointment. And we're talking about Canadian LPs here, so much excitement and disappointment. And the truth is always in the middle. And the pendulum probably has swung too far. And so I guess my only disagreement, and maybe I'm just going to be a little bit late, would just be maybe there's a little bit more to go. But with that said, I break the market into, at New Cannabis Ventures, we have we have one index for the Canadian LPs that has all the publicly traded companies that are listed in Canada. And I think that's 49 right now. And then there's Sundial and Tilray that don't have Canadian listings. So there's 51 publicly traded LPs, which is just crazy, right?
Right.
And break that into 3 different segments. And I have to tell you, it is so sad how few are in the top 2 segments. The top segment, we put companies that have 10 million or more Canadian dollar revenue per quarter. And then that second tier is 2.5 million to 10 million Canadian. And I think off the top of my head, and it's kind of odd because you would expect there to be a lot more in that 2.5 to 10.
Yeah.
There's nine in the tier 1, the 10 million and up, 9, but only 6 in the tier 2. And then 35 or whatever the difference is. I'm probably doing my math wrong, 34, whatever it is, that are in that tier 3. And so what it really shows you, Barrington, is there's been an epic failure in Canada. All these companies that thought they were going to grow and sell cannabis are odd lots. They're not doing it. Right. So we really have a bifurcated market. Now, I would say that in those odd lots, there are some very interesting companies. And I'd also say up at the top, there's some interesting valuations. And when I say interesting companies, that have decent valuations. And I don't want to get into naming those names. People can subscribe to 420 Investor if they want to know exactly what I'm talking about. But I've written about this publicly. And we have gotten to the point where there are companies out there that are not really burning a lot of cash, that have they're priced at or near their tangible book value or their investment. And that's a dangerous metric because, you can be worth something, but you have a worthless asset and you're not worth that. But so that's the first thing, that we have this market. Second, we know that the implementation in Canada has just been filled with errors. And the biggest error of all was not having a retail presence really on day 1 of legalization. What they should have done in hindsight, they didn't ask me, so it doesn't matter. But I would have told them, get the stores open in advance, do medical in stores, get the retail rolled out. But they waited. And so, we've had provincial issues, especially in Ontario. It's just insane.
Ontario is, it's been somewhat of a disaster, quite frankly.
And so I think, Canada's known to be conservative in its regulatory approach. I appreciate that. You only get one chance to do this the right way, and you're allowed to correct along the course. They've got to get some stores open. And so for this call to be right, they have to get these stores open. I know that Ontario is talking more about that, and they certainly seem to be recognizing the problem, but this is dead on arrival if we don't get more stores in Ontario. Alberta is doing a good job, but Alberta is a much smaller part of the country.
Yeah, Alberta has something like 300 plus retail stores, and
even more.
Ontario has 20 something.
Yeah, going to 50, but it's and some of those stores are doing great because there's nothing around, and it shows you people want to go, but people are not going to drive 30 minutes to go get cannabis for the most part, not on a regular basis. Maybe it's a novelty.
You actually touched upon something about driving for 30 minutes. Instead of driving for 30 minutes, people are still going down the street to the black market.
They don't have to go anywhere. They can get their cell phone and have it delivered.
So this,
which I think is headed to Ontario. They talked about, which is good.
So let's talk about the black market and where its role in this whole industry. Now, there are some people who believe the black market should be there, not as a place to get untested products or anything like that, more as a price check and keep the lit industry in line.
I don't know about that. I will tell you this, and it's not just Canada, it's California and it's other places. And people accuse me of being a capitalist pig and just pro-LP, and so I really have a very warm spot in my heart for the people, for a lot of the people, not all of them, because there are some outright thugs and criminals. So I don't want to sound like I'm doing a blanket dismissal of people who've been committing felonies all these years, but at the same time, there are a lot of people who have deep domain expertise and their hearts are in the right place, and they've been effectively shut out. And this is wrong. And I think the industry in Canada and elsewhere needs to figure out a better way to bring these people in. And I think that there'd be a lot better quality. I mean, I think everything I read tells me that the quality is better. Now, some would say, yeah, but they're not, they're using pesticides, so the quality's better. But I don't think that blanket dismissal is fair. I think that there's a lot of problems with illicit market cannabis, and the government should do whatever they can to allow whomever they can that has that deep domain expertise and passion into the industry, and that applies to everywhere, not just Canada.
No, I agree 100%. And on a more negative note, in that industry, especially the black market, there's been a vaping crisis, a massive vaping issue.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I don't think getting rid of certain flavors is a solution, but it's there. And actually, the sales from legal operations have increased because of this. So in a way, they've profited off of the unfortunate instances of people getting sick or worse. Now this vaping, this is a crisis because there is so much out there, and there's so many products that people are consuming and using and not knowing what's going on. How do you feel that we should tackle this, and how do you feel that we should deal with it? And I say we as an industry.
Yeah. So I'm a small L libertarian. I think I used to be a big L libertarian. So I understand that you can't just outlaw things. They will be supplied. So I think this is an extremely unfortunate incident. I've been following the space for 7 years, and I can remember, in 2013, 2014, in 2013 it was CBD vape pens, but seeing these CBD vape pens, and I was looking at them, and I was like, I'm not putting this crap in my lungs. And so I've been aware, and it's not just vaping, Barrington, even in edibles, things that aren't tested, you don't know what's in that, even in flour, lack of testing. So the good part about this crisis, if there's a silver lining, is that it really has raised awareness, not just about the cannabis, but about the devices, everything. And so there's going to be a huge upgrade here in the industry. And I think that's really the answer, that in the United States, it kind of argues for federal regulation. And as a small L libertarian, you never want to say you're for federal regulation, but I will say that I think that's where we're headed, and I'm okay with it. This is, for our industry to move forward, people have to have confidence in the products. The demand for cannabis is well established. It's always been there, but people have been blind to the risks. So this is a real opportunity for the industry to mitigate those risks and educate. And I think that's what needs to be done. And there's probably some government regulatory role as well.
I couldn't agree more. And speaking of government, you're in your beloved country, which is great, and our biggest neighbor and trading partner. Let's talk a little bit about the SAFE Act and what it means. Where's it passed? What's the next step? And how this will affect the industry, say in 2020, 2021, going forward. Yeah, go ahead.
And you meant the Safe Banking Act, right?
Sorry, yes, the Safe Banking Act.
Yeah, it sounded like maybe States Act.
No.
Yeah, safe banking is a step in the right direction. And for the listeners that aren't familiar, this is rather amazing, actually, that we had the House of Representatives pass this thing. This is unprecedented. And so when I came into this industry in 2013, we were dealing with a hands-off, kind of an ostrich approach. And there are some real problems as states legalize and not having any sort of federal clarity. And we saw that when Donald Trump got elected, that all of a sudden the safe harbors that were provided by the Cole Memo were in question, and then Jeff Sessions a year later took them away, of course. So this banking there are a lot of issues that need to be addressed. I think an important one, it's Veterans Day here in the United States on Monday, and I've been talking about this for years. It is insane that you can be a veteran in a medically legal state, and you can lose your benefits as a result of using state legal medical cannabis, and that has to be fixed. Another issue is research. We have to be able to do research. Institutions should not be at risk of losing their funding because they're doing cannabis research. But safe banking doesn't address those. What safe banking addresses is the cash. And how many people have to die before they get some common sense in Washington, D.C. and just say, let's do away with the cash? And so right now, it's not illegal for MasterCard, Visa, American Express, or Discover. They probably won't take Discover, but it's not illegal for them to process the transactions. But these are conservative institutions, and their interpretation is the risk is too great. It's a gray area. So it's not like it's illegal. And there are a lot of banks that are banking. They tend to be more regional banks, not the Bank of America and Citibank and banks like that. But nobody wants to talk about it because they don't want to get their deposit, the people that take their deposits in trouble. And there's a little bit of a competitive reason as well.
Let's shift some gears. And let's talk about some multinationals getting into this space, or what everybody's talking about, the other three letters besides THC, which are CBD. What is going on with CBD? It seems like everywhere I go, CBD infused, CBD laced, CBD a part of. It's everywhere, and Walmart, I believe now, is no exception. What's going on with this market?
So I'm going to one-up you. I was in Santa Fe this summer walking through the plaza, and they had CBD oxygen, which I don't even think really exists. But then I went to the farmer's market in Colorado, and they, I think a quarter of the places had big signs that said CBD. So it's a race to the bottom right now, and it's a wild west. And I have not heard about Walmart specifically, but that's in line with what we're seeing. All sorts of retailers, the drugstores like Walgreens and CVS, for example, but also all these retailers that are really struggling in general have announced a lot of them have announced CBD initiatives. And so, everybody thought there was a green light when hemp legislation passed last year, but here we are a year later. And it's a murky environment. And so the way it is now, the Walmarts of this world and the large food and drugstore companies, they're comfortable selling topicals. That's all they're really comfortable. And then the health food stores are willing to push it a little bit more, like Vitamin Shop, for instance. They'll sell the ingestibles. But right now, everybody's waiting on the FDA. The FDA has asserted its regulatory authority, so everybody's waiting to see what they say. Some people say that they have no regulatory authority, but I'm not going to bet on that one. So I think CBD is, I read all the time headlines like hemp farmers bet on hemp, or farmers bet on hemp and fail. And I think that's a really sad and prominent story. The hemp prices are plunging. There's oversupply already. We're just getting started. But I think there'll be more demand for CBD over time. I think consumers have to be confused. I mean, you go into the gas station to buy it, which is a very frequent point of purchase, and the person selling it doesn't even know what it is. So when we get that FDA regulatory authority, and when we get a lot of the snake oil salesmen out, and companies can confidently, there are some very well-established, good CBD companies, and actually, just to point out what's going on, CD Sciences, which I think is one of those, I follow it closely. It doesn't trade on the CSE.
Not yet.
You know what I'm talking about? The CD Sciences, they should have moved to the CSE.
Yeah, there's still time.
Their sales dropped 25%, Barrington, year over year. 25%, and this is in a growth market. And they talked about the Wild West environment and what was going on in the health food store channel. Just too many suppliers. A lot of suppliers putting product on the shelf for free. And it's just a fight. So it's going to take a while for that market to right itself.
Well, Alan, this has been great. This has been long overdue. We will have to do it again. maybe on location in Miami.
In
January, February.
Late February.
This has been extremely informative for our listeners and for those watching. Please check out 420 Investor, New Cannabis Ventures. I'm your host, Barrington Miller, with #Finance from the Canadian Securities Exchange, and I've had the pleasure of talking with Alan Brochstein, founder of 420 Investor. Thank you very much, Alan.
Thanks, Barry. Thanks.
We're social here at the CSE. Each and every day we'll keep you up to date on trending topics that investors are talking about, such as cannabis, blockchain, and esports. Follow daily CSE news and events on your favorite social media platform: Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube. You'll find exclusive interviews with leading entrepreneurs from a variety of industries, thought-provoking stories from across the world of finance, and updates from CSE events taking place worldwide. Join the conversation and connect with us today.